we saw a lot of it. And we know that you've also submitted Mount Kilimanjaro. So forget about Table Mountain, Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's one of the interesting part. And I mean, you also submitted Mount Elbrus in Russia. So Thebe, your CV is long. We appreciate you blessing us with your presence. You are welcome, and thank you very much.
Thank you so
much. And on the other side, we have Gordon. Gordon is actually someone who started in engineering, ended up doing an MBA with Vets Business School, and he migrated from engineering into market research industry around 1983. And in 1985, he became involved in market research, development for brand strategies. So both the gentlemen are like very, very clued up when it comes to brand. And one of the passions that Gordon has is to help mentor postgraduates who require research and statistic analysis topics. Gentlemen, welcome to you and welcome to everyone. Thebe, we just want to start with you just to give us an overview around purpose-driven conscious marketing, especially given the current conditions that we are in as a country and the world.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to join in the business of marketing and building brands around the continent, or most specifically in South Africa. What an interesting topic that has consumed us so much more this year. COVID itself has been also a catalyst, if you will. But perhaps I should start by looking at how the Guardian put it. The Guardian termed the last 10 years as a decade of protest. Because in this last decade, we have seen a lot of interesting, things happen. Some of the things that we've seen in the last decade, we've seen what we call for around 20. Last year we had Greta Thunberg, as you know, protesting against climate change or fighting for climate. We've seen it from 20. Irrelevant. We have seen from Oxford in London to Cape Town, where I live, people are protesting against roads. They said roads must fall. We have seen in the past months, it's been happening for a long time, people saying we are all against gender-based violence. We have seen this year in particular, the Black Lives Matter movement. We have seen the last couple of years the Me Too movement. What is so interesting about all these events is that these events were not just, if you will, social protests, but these events in many ways also then went on to ask the most important question to brands that are doing business, with those affected or by any one of these, and ask them an important question. What is your role? What stand do you take? What stand are you do? What does your brand stand for? Because if your brand was so clear, if your brand was relevant, your brand would do the most important thing. It will take a stand. It will take a stand that is not just about protecting your products and services, but a stand that says, how relevant are you to some of the challenges of society today? We've seen some of the research that have come out in this area, where, for example, 53% of people interviewed by Marketing Week said they will think highly of a profit company, of a for-profit company, if it was making a positive social impact. We do know something that's quite interesting now, that, for example, the millennials are saying, 70% of the millennials, in another survey done by Meaningful Brands, the 70% of the millennials says they will punish any brand that does not contribute positively to society. But what is more difficult for us in the business of building brands is that, as part of that survey, 74% of consumers said they would not hesitate to get rid or to completely disregard or to switch from a brand that is not contributing to society. Not only that, and they said, 74% of them said they will not miss any of these brands if we change. Now, we're in the business of building brands. Now, imagine if your brand was put in that space. It is for that reason that you then begin to see brands asking themselves the question, how relevant am I on many of these issues? What contribution am I making? Or what is my point of view on many of these issues? What is my point of view when it comes to Black Lives Matter? And that's why Nike says, this time, just don't do it. They ask themselves the question: how relevant are you? How relevant are you in the issues in the issues of the day where people are? Where some of the imagery that we see around, whether it's in malls or whether it's on packaging and all those, does not positively reflect who we are as people. And that's why you see Quaker says we need to get rid of the packaging of Auntie Jemima, because it is based on the negative narrative. Yes, it makes a lot of money for us. Yes, a lot of people love it. That's why you see the Washington Redskins, they say, you know what? All these years, we know that the Redskins are about the American Indians. We know that it doesn't sit well with them. We are going to rebrand. We are going to redo the equity that we've built here and rebuild a higher purpose equity by showing that we're a business and a brand that is connected and understand that we're a part of this greater society, part of this diverse society. And if we're part of this diverse society, we cannot offend any one of it. That is why when a brand like H&M offends us, because perhaps it's cool to say the coolest monkey on a t-shirt, because it's a nice thing to say. Maybe maybe 5 or 10 years ago, we'd have all overlooked this and we'd have done this. That is why you saw the EFF and many people go to Sandton City and destroy the shop, because because consumers are saying we will punish any brand that is out of step with societal norms. Societal norms about how you treat women, societal norms about race, societal norms about culture. So where are we today? We are at an important stage or juncture for brands, where the question is being asked: what is your stand when it comes to matters?
Wow, that's
what it's about culture.
That's very interesting, Thebe. I think you've just wrapped up our forum.
Okay,
but don't leave. Don't leave.
Now.
Gordon.
Andrew.
Yes. Yeah, we've just had a lecture, a masterclass lecture there. I think. I hope he didn't take any of your words. I know that you come from a research aspect of things. So let's hear your opening remarks.
I didn't plan an opening remark, except to say that Thebe and I haven't shared notes at all. In fact, we've just met here, and I empathize with everything that you've just said. And as you were talking, Thebe, it struck me that, one thing that's sure about us human beings, we never learn. We never seem to learn from the past. And I was reading recently about an author that I respect greatly, and I haven't read all of his books, but I read a few, and it's George Orwell. And I read that he spent months, if not even more, maybe even part of, or even up to a year or more of his life, living on the streets of London, and I believe Paris as well, along with the beggars and the homeless people, without any resources. And he did that to be able to truly empathize and feel what it's like to be penniless and freezing cold, and to eat out of dustbins, and to have to deal with the emotional difficulties that homeless people have to deal with. And of course, that served him well in writing many books. But the point of this is that it was only by putting himself in the shoes of the other person that he was able to truly empathize and understand what it felt like. And I think that purpose-driven, conscious marketing begins with this philosophy of you have to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. The other person could be your customer. It could be your shareholder. It could be your employees. It could be your boss or your manager. It could be your supplier. It doesn't matter who it is, all these stakeholders that are involved in our brands and in our businesses. If we don't have a habit of putting ourselves in their shoes and living and feeling what it's like to be in their shoes, we can't possibly ever empathize and develop the heart and therefore the trust that's necessary to create long, loyal customer relationships. There's a thing called the golden rule, and I don't really know much about it. I've heard of it, and I think we all know it. It apparently appears in almost all religions in some form or another, and it goes like this: don't do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Put in old-fashioned type of English. I believe this appears in all philosophies and religions. And that's exactly what George Orwell was saying. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. When this lockdown was announced, Kim, who's in the audience today, she's one of my colleagues at Bateleur, she said to me, you know what, Gordon, I think that this is going to be the proverbial reset button being set. In other words, we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to reset our operating system. And I think that we now all know 2 or 3 months later that the future is going to be dramatically different. I think we also know that although there's lots of us who are predicting what it's going to be like, that actually none of us really do know what it's going to be like. And that the most important thing we can do is to prepare for that change, to be adaptable and to be flexible and to anticipate difference and to anticipate belt tightening, ego tightening, and to anticipate that consumers are going to get very, very smart. They have to. They've got less money. Fewer have got jobs. And you know, when my team and I decided to do some research on this topic in late March, early April, the point I got to on trust and ethics, I started off by saying consumers are no longer asleep. And I use these words without ever having thought about conscious marketing or purpose-based marketing in any great depth, nor even preparing for this discussion. But I wrote here, consumers will have a heightened cynicism and a reduced acceptance of the frivolous, of the insincere, of browbeating or emotional blackmailing when it comes to business ethics. And tying back into what Thebe was saying, the last 10 years or 12 years, if you go back to subprime, the subprime collapse and the beginning of the Great Recession in 2008 was just yet another example of trust being thrown out the window. All those pieces of paper and those contracts, IOUs in other words, sold on as other IOUs, they meant nothing. There was a basis of lack of trust. Think about the last 10 years in our country. Think of the big brand names that you know of in private business that have disgraced themselves, that are in the news every single day in denigrating consumers' trust. I won't even talk about some of the public domain problems on trust. Media, social media, and media in general has got this new thing attached to it called fake news. I'd never heard of this until the last few years. Fake news equals lack of trust. Let's not even talk about South Africa. Let's move on to the rest of the world. My heavens, you know, shall we talk about Brexit? Shall we talk about what is happening in America in the last few weeks or months? What a disgrace. Shall we talk about Hong Kong? Well, let me not even talk any further. Shall we talk about the murders in Iran? I don't really know where to begin. But all I know is that our children today, doing their lessons from home on Skype or on Zoom, are looking at us as leaders in the business community, in the political community, in church and social communities, and saying, what kind of a future do we have? What kind of a future have you guys brought upon us? There are big question marks. And ultimately, when there are question marks, that's the time for faith. And I mean faith in terms of trust. Trust in the quality, trust in the durability, trust in the reliability, trust in service, trust in value, trust in the no hidden costs and charges, and trust in our neighbors, the people around us, which is why I think that there's a move towards a local and artisanal. And just to finally say, I think that many people wake up every morning and they get out of bed on the wrong side. I can't believe how many people are generally speaking negative. Why? Why not be positive? Trust starts with positivity. That's the first thing. Secondly, functional focus. If you're not focused in what you're doing, and that means purposeful. Purposeful and focus are the same thing. Then you're going to create a lack of trust. If we are A, tomorrow, and B, yesterday, and C, the day after, how can people trust you if we're not consistent and focused? And finally, I'll get back to the golden rule and to George Orwell. We must spend a lot more of our time as marketers in the shoes of our stakeholders, starting with our customer.
Very interesting, Gordon. And I like what you keep on emphasizing when it comes to putting yourself in the shoes of the customers or society. And if you look at what our situation is in South Africa, especially economic-wise, and the fact that people are losing jobs, we're still in lockdown, government is being taken to court by certain sectors of the economy, which are brands as well. And these brands are trying to also protect their workers, because if they don't, those workers are going to be out of jobs. So do you think, especially when we look at that aspect, do you think brands are ready to face on with government when it comes to protecting the interest of their stakeholders? In this case, it can be their workers and their families. Do you think our brands are kind of like jacked up for this to take on government, like some of them are doing? Thebe, it also goes to you that way.
Well, they have no choice, do they? They have no choice because the power has been returned to its rightful place, which is the consumer. So, and that's why in the two most important pieces of research I've shared with you, that 74% of them say they will not miss any of these brands if they disappear today, and 75% of them say they will punish them if they do not align with the societal norms. So the brands have got no choice. They have to respond to the consumer needs. I think you saw you saw, for example, the power of a movement like Rhodes Must Fall, when a brand like the University of Cape Town had to acquiesce to the power of the students, because their most important customer is the learner, and the learner took the battle to them. So a government does not exist on its own and for itself. A government is a servant of the people. And if the government does not do their job, the people will go to the government. I think you've seen the power of that in daylight in the US now with the Black Lives Matter. How long has this protest been going? It's been going on now for months. When is our George Floyd has been passed on brutally passed on many months ago, but the power of the consumer has not gone. The other important thing that you have to understand now is, more than any other time, the battle is not limited to your country anymore. So the George Floyd issue happened in America, but everybody in the world participated in that fight. The Black Lives Matter is now a global, I don't want to call it a movement, because a movement sounds like something where we get together and do. It is a global issue about social justice, which is taken up by everybody around the world. The same way that the brand South Africa was taken on globally during the dark days of apartheid, where everybody in the world took on this challenge, and the government of the time simply had to buckle down to the pressure. The governments have got no say in this. The brands have got no say in this. The most loudest and the most powerful voice is a consumer with their wallet, and a citizen with their vote. the two most important currencies of the day, past, present, and more so of the future.
Got it.
Yes, to tie in with what Thebe said, once again, you know, I don't know what everyone else's beliefs in, but I certainly believe that government is there to provide broad guidelines, not to dictate specifics on behavior. You can't micromanage a population. You can govern by providing the frameworks and the principles. Brands these days are at the behest of consumers who have, yes, a wallet in one hand, as Thebe rightly says, but they have another thing in the other hand, and it's called the cell phone. And we're talking from a media platform today. When I was young in the advertising world in the 80s, you know, a media plan was conceived over months and executed over months and was pre-planned to the minute. And completely predictable. Today, the media plan can be the push of a button gone viral. And we've seen that in Hong Kong. We've seen that in Egypt. We've seen that recently in America. What Twitter can do in calling the consumer base of any brand to action is astounding. And it costs nothing. There's no media budget behind it. And it has more power and authenticity than the best conceived, focused marketing plan. And the reason for that is that somehow consumers trust each other more than they trust us marketers. So when Twitter goes wild with a message that says, support this, it's coming from my friends. It's coming from my family. I trust them. So this is more proof that purpose-based and conscious marketing has at its core trust. And trust is now firmly in the hands of consumers. And us marketers and government ought to do the best we can to nurture the positive flow of that energy rather than to divert it to our own gain.
Very interesting. And I like when you actually mention the social media aspect of things, because that's one area where you have to be careful as a brand when you enter any kind of like issues that on social media, because social media can be volatile in some cases, because 1 minute you will think you are there to help, only to find that you end up getting your fingers bent. And I'm not sure if brands are actually aware of how to approach that aspect of social media, because when things start trending on social media, and then perhaps a brand that is not clued up on how to kind of go and engage on social media, end up meddling and getting their fingers bent, that can work against them. But how would you say is the best way to kind of like observe social media or get involved when you want to take a stand on a certain issue?
You know, I always say all brands must know what they stand for. First of all brands must know who they are. They must know, so that's a fundamental first. You must know who you are as to what is your position, what is your raison d'etre, why are you alive, what is your purpose, why were you founded, or why did you create, why were you created? That's the first thing. The second thing is a brand must understand what ties them to the consumers, the relationship that they have with the consumer. Because you see, that relationship will guide the conversations you can have. It's the same thing that in a personal level, that whatever you put out in the social media, you are creating a license on what can be talked about between you and whoever follows you. Similarly, if a brand knows what it stands for, and it understands the relationship that it has with this consumer, in other words, why are they with me? Why are they on my side? Why do they love me? Why do they support me? And then their conversations are guided by that relationship. There'll be fewer problems. And that relationship, by the way, extends also not to just the relationship they have in terms of a consumer, in terms of a consumption relationship, but it is also in terms of they are standing in the community, they're standing in society. So that's why the third most important one is, what stand are they prepared to take in society today. So those three things, what you stand for, the relationship that you have with the consumer, and what you stand for. Once you're clear about those, you now know how to run your social media. See, the problem that a lot of brands have is the problem that a lot of us have. Is we go on, we sign up on Twitter, Instagram, and all those, and we start participating in conversations which are irrelevant to us, participating which are disconnected to our brand, conversations which absolutely don't build or add on to who we are, and for which we are not prepared. Same thing is a brand. Don't forget that a brand is a person as well. A company is a person. So as an individual, as a person, you need to understand and know yourself. And you need to define the relationships you want to have. That's what taking a stand is about. Define the relationship that you have. Because once you've defined that, then it's much easier for you to understand how well your brand will stand in social media. There's no such thing as a brand don't know how to handle social media. All it is that some brands are just some brands are just bloody curious. What's the right word? Is they should not be, they're in spaces they should not be in. They just want to do things because other people are doing things. Most brands are like most of us. We just like to follow things that have got nothing to do with us. Stay in your lane. First define your lane, then stay in it, then you'll have fewer problems.
That's very nicely put, Thebe. And it also talks to having a brand purpose or a brand soul or a brand essence or whatever you like to call it, your lane as you put it. And that ties into purpose-based marketing or purpose-based businesses. And I think that a lot of mistakes that happen on social media is that brands go out there, or organizations go into social media or any media when their purpose is self-serving. Your purpose can't be self-serving. As soon as it's self-serving, you're back into the old style of marketing, which is basically pushing your features, your benefits, and you run the risk of offending people, of not being relevant. You've actually got to genuinely contribute some sort of value to the community that you're talking to in your social media or your app or your communication to get respect and to get trust. Thebe also talked about consistency. Amateurs might vary their message depending on which side of bed they get out of in the morning. That's terrible. That creates a tremendous mistrust. And then some brands go even further, and that is to essentially fib or be partially truthful only, or omit half the truth, or be vague. All of these things can be construed as being fake or lies. And my late father's words ring in my ears, and I often quote this. He used to say to me, Gordon, if you never lie, you never have to remember what you said. And that's so true. If you are true and honest to your brand's purpose on social media, you're unlikely to get caught in crossfire or to some kind of an embarrassing backlash. But more importantly, you're likely to generate respect and trust and get lots of referrals that come from trustworthy sources.
Correct.
Well, I think you mentioned a very interesting aspect when you're talking about being partial with the truth, and another relevant one, which we can say it's an example of what's going on in South Africa with some of the small businesses who thought they were insured against something like lockdown and COVID-19, but only to find out obviously insurers didn't have something specific that relates to lockdown. And most of the claims that the small businesses submitted ended up being declined. And we've seen some of the insurers making a U-turn to say, we will pay for those declined claims. So I think again, as we learn this situation that we're finding ourselves in, there's a lot of things that brands are going to learn as we go. I'm not sure if you can give any example like what I've given, but do you think brands should praise themselves to this learning curve that we're finding ourselves? Because it looks like you said in the beginning, Gordon, that No one knows what the future looks like from here.
Yes, but you may not know what the future looks like, but you certainly know who you are as a brand. And we've learned a few things about brands. We've learned, for example, Nokia. Nokia was the standard brand, just like Skype. Skype was the standard video calling or voice or a brand that you can use to connect with people from all over, just like Nokia was. But Nokia was soon overtaken by Nike, by Apple. And Skype was soon overtaken by Zoom. And people asked, they asked the CEO of Nokia, what happened? He says, we did nothing and we lost. He says, we did nothing wrong and we lost. What they didn't do is they did not stay first in step, but mostly they need to do what a friend of mine taught me many years ago. A friend of mine many years ago said to me, he says, you see, Thebe, as a marketer, the job you need to do is you need to go so far ahead of the consumers so that when they arrive there in the future, they find you ready to serve them. So what did Apple do? Apple did just that. They found, or maybe forget Apple, Walkman Sony did that before, because Walkman Sony created this unnecessary device where you walk around and listening to music on a tape. And they did ask Akio Morito, did you do any research? How did you arrive at this idea? He says, you can't ask consumers the things they don't know. Instead, what you need to do, similar to how Apple came with iPod and iPhone and all those, you need to redefine the future. But even now we are learning with a brand like Apple as well, is even where you are in your success, do not rest on your laurels. Because a lot of us like to rest on our laurels. It's just that the job is much higher now, it's much tougher now. As I've said, the job is tougher now because one, you are no longer dealing with the customers in your country only. You are dealing with a global audience, even though you're only serving people in Johannesburg. Because you go onto social media, everybody else can access you. So it means whatever decisions you make right or wrong here could have implications about your future elsewhere. Because what you do wrong here becomes research for somebody to do right somewhere and come back and serve your customer where you are. So what brands need to do is they need to do what my friend said. Go far into the future. Go ahead of your customers, but stay in step with who they are as people, so that when they arrive in that future, they must find you ready to serve them.
Absolutely. You know, we sometimes get very caught up in our cleverness. And it is true that many things are invented without consumers having even thought about them. I think the cell phone was a classic case in point. And 110 years ago, the motor car was difficult for people to accept as they watered and fed their horses. But many times we tend to invent things or innovate for the sake of innovation, rather than keeping in step with, as you put it, Thebe, the customer. And obviously I'm a researcher, so it's easy for me to say, listen to the customer. But you know, us researchers are often very guilty of looking at a bar graph on a PowerPoint presentation and quoting X percentage of people said this or Y percentage of people said that. And that's important. But you know, 2 years ago, I was in a little room in a village in the north of Kenya with an interviewer talking to a 19-year-old girl who's a sex worker. And I had preconceived ideas about what this meant, what a sex worker meant, and they were negative ideas. When I heard her talk about the money she needed to provide to look after her baby who's with her parents, when I saw the tragedy of her life, actually, those numbers on the bar graph suddenly had a new meaning to me. They had a meaning that was very tearful, and they brought a heart and an emotion to me that made it very clear that one of my purposes in life is to bring the truth about how human beings feel to the marketing discussion table. And I think that once again, I'm back to putting yourself in the shoes of that other person or the consumer or whoever it might be. Without empathy, we truly cannot ever expect trust. Without trust, we cannot expect loyalty. Without loyalty, we cannot expect, and here's the big bucks, repeat turnover from the same customer with a low cost of acquisition and therefore long-term profits. Sorry to bring it back to money, but the income statement is important.
Gentlemen, let's check with our audience. Pat, are you picking some questions from your side?
There are no questions as yet, but I think people need to start typing the questions quickly.
Okay. And I think, Gordon, you just mentioned something very interesting when you talked about the income statement. And what comes to mind is looking at conscious marketing. And I think Thebe mentioned something like that in the beginning, interest before profit. You making sure that you look at the interest of your stakeholders before profit. But at the same time, we know that when times are tough, like what's happening currently, you wonder how many brands will be able to sacrifice resources that bring profits into their bottom line for the interest of conscious marketing, perhaps.
If I can reply to that one, it's a long-term thing. You don't suddenly wake up on Wednesday morning, the 29th, is it the 29th today? I think it is, and suddenly be a conscious marketer. It's something that you do consistently. I know very well a brand, a South African brand that you all know extremely well. And this particular company puts enormous effort into quality control and enormous effort into the care of its people. It's a multinational global brand. And its brand, if you research it, it stands for quality. It stands for durability. It's something that people know will not break down or let them down. And as times have got tougher and tougher and tougher over the past 10 years, this brand's market share has grown and grown and grown. In fact, it's now about 60% higher than it was 6 years ago in a shrinking and declining market. And it's been an absolute concrete proof to me that it's the daily effort of putting huge money and passion into looking after your customers' interests in terms of the quality and the service that you provide that ultimately will give you the benefits when times get tough like they are now. I have no doubt that this particular brand, through the lockdown generated recession that's still ahead of us, will fare even better in terms of market share. It's like exercise, Andrew. You don't get fit by going for a run once.
Yeah, because I think one of the examples that
Well, wait.
Okay, Thebe?
I said, I thought I'm just gonna get fit sitting here. But now he says, Gordon says I need to go out and exercise. So, but Gordon is right. Gordon is right. Is right. You gotta keep. You have to keep at this, and you cannot rest on your laurels. For any brand, I think there's a simple triple P. People says there's the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line today is about being passionate, following your passions, which will lead you to your purpose. And that purpose will lead you to your profits. That's the triple bottom line now.
Yeah, I was checking if Pat has something on his side, because I think one of the important part that Thebe, you mentioned when you talked about the brands that fell asleep and they were leading, and all of a sudden they lost the position, and it brought me back to thought leadership. When it comes to your customers, you have to occupy a position of thought leadership where they know that you are the one who's guiding them. You are the one who's leading in terms of where innovation is going in the future. Because I think you mentioned as some of the brands that have just lost what could have been an opportunity during this lockdown or during this pandemic, where people are now doing everything online, but that brand is not actually in the forefront when it comes to benefiting. So I think thought leadership in terms of brands is really something that I think we're going to take out as a very important lesson coming out of this lockdown?
Well, I don't think it's thought leadership. I think it's
Uh-huh.
called agility. So what brands are required to
Agility.
do now is you need to be agile. You need to be able to adjust. You need to be able to realign, because a lot of brands have the brands which are not going to be able to set to thrive during this time are those brands which are rigid. So look at yourself as a person. Did you ever think that you'll be spending the last 150 days doing what you do every day for a living from home? It has taken agility. It has taken ability for you to realign your thinking, to readjust, and say that as the brand, as a person, as an employer, as an employee, I need to rethink how I do things. So it's about realignment. So it's about adjustment, agility. But second most important thing is I want to why I wanted to dispute this thought leadership part of it. It's about trust. Now you can remember a brand called BlackBerry. Now BlackBerry, what was their promise to us? Their promise to us is they were never gonna go down, and their promise to us is they are encrypted. What is the one thing that happened to BlackBerry? They blacked out on us one day, and they were not agile enough to respond to our queries. Or I'm not even sure if it was agility or it was arrogance, but it was one of the two A's. They were either not agile or they were too arrogant to respond to us quickly enough when we asked them, you seem to have let me down. Is there something that's gone wrong? Where is BlackBerry today? Gone. So the brands which are not going to survive now, yes, the truth is a lot of the business and brands which are not going to survive now are just not going to survive purely because of the economic situation that all of us are in. But the most important one is many of those brands which are not agile are not going to be able to move here. It's a simple ABC for me: agility, deliverability, and consistency. That's how you are going to stay relevant throughout COVID, throughout life, and during these days.
We have a question on our Zoom. Anonymous, he says, I've noticed that Nandos are very good with their advertising and their messaging, very capturing and enticing. What can government do to keep its audience interested and capture the mind of their audience? And I think this question, goes towards the current situation that government is finding itself. Because I think if you look at how government is trying to please every sector of the society while trying to tackle the pandemic, do you think they can find a way in which they can communicate to the audience in a captive and interesting to the society? I think that's the first question. And then we have
they did in the beginning, but they became boring in the end. Were not able to maintain our interest. Because if you remember how we all got glued to our television station, I think 21 or 20 or first 3rd of March or somewhere, how we became glued to the second presentation that the president did, how we became glued when the professor was giving us the stats of how those COVID pandemic works and how we're going to manage it. The question then became thereafter, were they adding value with the subsequent engagements? So it's not good enough just to sit and to ask me to come to a screen at 8 o'clock to come and listen to you because you are a president, or because you're a minister, or because you're a CEO of a brand, or because you're some guru of all those. The question is, that which you're going to share with me now, how relevant is it to my current situation? The situation I'm in now as a consumer is, I'm not working, I'm not earning, I'm not able to apply my talent. When you come and make a presentation at 8 o'clock, how's that going to move me from that situation? Or how's that going to mitigate that? Or how's that going to say, stay the course, Thebe, because it is for a good cause? So the question is not about how government can do. Government can call a press conference anytime. We'll go. The question is, do I want to listen to them? How interesting are they?
I hope the National Command Council is listening. We have another one from Tepo. It goes like, how do we ensure impact and longevity for rebranding and realigning in a conservative industry such as renewable energy? So I think he's being specific as to which industry he's asking the question regarding, renewable energy industry. How do we ensure impact and longevity for rebranding and realigning?
If I can respond to that one, and my response might be a little oblique, but let me try and give you a touch of background before the answer. I think there's the answer. In my 40 odd years in business, I've heard this around the boardroom table all the time. We have to grow. We have to grow at all costs. It's all about expansion, geographic expansion, brand proliferation, line extensions, brand acquisition, market share growth, grow. 6 billion people. When I was a lighty, there were 3 billion people on planet Earth, 1963. There's now 7.5 going on 8. How much can we continue to grow? Grow. And at the same time, the Gini coefficient gets bigger and bigger in many countries, especially in South Africa. And then you look at all the waste. And what COVID-19 and lockdown has shown me is it's how many people have said to me, Gordon, I'm amazed at how much less we can do with every month. We don't have to buy all this stuff all the time. A refrigerator doesn't have to be jam-packed with stuff, half of which we throw away all the time. And yes, it's not good for Pick n Pay and Spar and Checkers that people are living on less. But you know what? We got to a stage where as human beings, we've become opulent, chucking all our waste into the sea, chucking our waste into the air. And I have a passion that I think is part of a purpose-based business, which is preservation and refinement. There has to come a stage in the evolution of human beings on planet Earth where we stop growing and start thinking about preserving and refining. Now, energy is right at the heart of that. If we can't get onto renewable energy, I think you called it a conservative industry. I think it was Tsepo. We're never going to survive. If ultimately, we're not talking about short-term like lockdown and COVID. We're talking about our children and their children. Somehow, mankind has to get to a point of preservation and refinement. And I think that in brands, it's the same. Do we have to launch yet another flavor every month of our lives? Maybe it's time to make sure that our customers are kept satisfied. And maybe it's time to make sure that we have good balance. Once again, I'll refer to my father. He was a teenager in the Second World War, and he said to me, 5 years after the Second World War, I used to stand in a queue in the snow in Edinburgh. He studied there, looking for 4 hours, looking forward to my weekly egg that was rationed. He said everybody was really thin. Everybody. Nobody had too much. But we are in a state today where we have become very opulent, very greedy, and very wasteful. And I think that energy is a classic case where there should be thought leadership and brand leadership. And we don't have that in South Africa. I don't know if the rest of the world's the same, but we certainly have got a long way to go in creating energy brands that have consumers' trust.
That's a very interesting question. There's a very interesting question on the panel. There's 2 questions. Where's Patrick when we need him? People are asking questions. I love the comment on the side that says about government, that government just doesn't need advertising and all that. All government needs to do is to deliver on its promises. Very precise. I think that's so important. But the question that I absolutely caught my attention is the question that asks, is there a correlation between purpose-driven brands and local and African birth products? And that question was asked by Mpho Odette Mashiko. And I think
I can see that one.
I thought, what a superb question. Because what is happening now is we are now seeing how all of us now are beginning to think insular. We are now thinking into our countries, into our cultures, into where we are. The reason a brand like Maxhosa will succeed, for example, is because it is a brand that from a purpose point, it says, how do I retain and maintain and promote our culture and use that responsibly to tell the story of who we are as people and make and have and also create jobs here in the country. That's purpose driven. That's purpose driven because a brand like Maxhosa is protecting the culture as well as protecting the jobs. Or a brand like Tepo Jeans, so whatever, all those brands which are made and inspired by our local needs, as well as creating opportunities and jobs to retain the profits in the country to meet that purpose. Purpose is understanding we need to build this country together. Purpose is about understanding that whatever profits we make needs to be shared. It's that concept of shared value. We do well when you do well.
That's very interesting because I think, one of the key principles of conscious marketing is it's a conscious culture. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in South Africa. I know there's also Batu shoes, the Batu brand, which is kind of like even taking the market by storm. There's another question from Nash, actually it's on the chat. He says, how does one market and research while facing the challenges such as COVID-19?
If I can answer that question, the same as you always have done, using various methodologies, qualitative and quantitative, and various different ways of doing it, from face-to-face interviews, using all the social distancing and hygiene practices that we now all know and understand, to online work, to using Zoom, etc. So market research goes on. There's no, in fact, we're finding that it's easier to get to talk to people now because people feel that they can contribute more. So strictly speaking, market research should be easier now in this lockdown environment.
Indeed.
Gentlemen, I think as we are approaching the wrap up, because we're already on 5:30, I'm just going to give it to you to kind of leave us with words of wisdom as your closing remarks, and you can expect your checks after we've done with COVID-19. Thebe, yeah, take it away.
Oh, I think you asked the question. The question of the day is purpose-driven marketing. And purpose-driven marketing starts with an important undertaking, which is about taking a stand. All brands faced with the challenges of today, the challenges of gender-based violence, the challenges of social injustice, the challenges of discrimination, the challenges of climate change, the challenges of unemployment. All brands have to take a stand. They have to take a stand and ask themselves the most important question. What role do I play today? Because my job shouldn't just be about peddling and pushing my brands onto the customers, but it should also understand that the license I have to exist, the license I have, the permission I have to stay in business comes precisely from those consumers. So the question I must ask myself as a brand is the simple ABC. Am I aligned with their needs? Am I aligned with the needs and the shifts of society? Am I believable? Is there trustworthiness about my brand? Am I doing it out of a good heart, out of an authentic place, or am I trying to just make money? Am I part of the community? That's my simple ABCs for a great brand. But what a great brand cannot do today is to stay on the sidelines. They have to be part of the solution to move this country, this continent, this world forward.
No more standing on the sideline. Thank you very much, Mr. Ikalafeng. Gordon, over to you.
I'm not sure if it's Peter Tosh or Bob Marley that sang of conscious man. I'm sure someone will quickly enlighten me. I'm giving away my age and my passion here, but conscious or consciousness is to many what defines Homo sapiens. And I do believe that animals have some kind of a consciousness, but we are defined by consciousness. So what does consciousness mean? I don't know, because I'm not a psychologist, but it has something to do with balancing thinking and feeling. Thinking means knowing what's going on around you, and feeling means reacting empathetically towards it. And my message to people who are involved in the management of brands and purpose-based businesses and who want to be conscious orientated is create an equal balance of thinking and feeling in all your actions in your work.
Wow. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I know that there's some questions that were asked. I'm just going to read them. One from Palisa. She says, I assist NGOs with marketing, and I'm very frustrated with the stereotypical messaging in the sector. How can we uplift people's stories without falling into stereotypical language and iconography? How do we ensure that your gaze is conscious?
It's the Japanese call it genshi genbutsu. It means go and be with the source. In other words, go out into the marketplace and spend real time in the real place with the people whom you are serving and listen to them with a big heart and big ears, and the stories will become authentic.
And the last one here says, good evening, gentlemen. We are seeing media houses also being affected due to COVID-19 as advertising spend drops. What advice would you give all these media houses at this time? Because marketing budgets are always first to go in advertisers' mind when the crash hits. So that was the last one.
As a media agency, you have to ask yourself, what is your job? What is the primary job? Your primary job is about how to connect consumers with the brands. So if that's your primary job, then ask yourself, in this digital era we're in this time that we're in of limited budgets, times of few spending on brands, but also in a time where consumers are not out in the streets anymore, how do I still do the job in a new way? They need to realize, they need to be agile. They need to redefine how they do business.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your time, and keep safe, wear your masks, and sanitize.
Where's your mask? Thank you so much. Have a great one. Stay home, stay safe, and keep the distance.
All right.
Thank you, Thebe. Thank you, Andrew and Patrick.
Thank you, Gordon.
To all the participants, I'm very grateful for your time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.